Good evening, councillors, officers and members of the public. Welcome to this evening's North Area Planning Committee. Please be aware that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed to the Council's YouTube channel, and I welcome viewers joining us online. I'll just run through a few housekeeping rules. Can I request that mobile phones are either turned off or switched to silence, please, for the duration of the meeting. I'll quickly run through the protocol for member and public participation and the rules of debate. Please note that the Chair's ruling during the debate will be final. If you have registered to speak, I will introduce you by name and invite you to address the meeting at the appropriate time. The Development Management Officer will introduce the item relating to the planning application and summarise the main points. When this has been completed, I will then invite members of the public who have registered to speak on the item to address the meeting. Members of the committee will then be given the opportunity to ask for clarification from speakers, and the item will then be moved and seconded and debated before a vote is taken. Just as a reminder, we will be using the voting cards again tonight, councillors. And as there are quite a lot of us sitting around the table this evening, I'll just introduce the officers who are present this evening. So starting off from my right, we have Sarah Fayaz, the legal advisor to the committee. Michelle Vaz, the planning lawyer from Dentons, who is acting for North Northants Council. Ben Smith, Head of Democratic Services. Jasbir Sandhu, Head of Development and Management, Planning Development Management and Enforcement. Louise Holland, Planning Manager. Reddy Namali, Planning Officer. Sorry, Louise is a Planning Manager. I should have said, did I say Manager Officer? I did, okay. Thomas Horner, Planning Lawyer at Dentons, who is acting on behalf of North Northants Council. Chris Bond, Highways, North Northants Council. Palm Tasanj and then Matthew Olive, both who are from Aspinall Verde and are both viability consultants. Welcome and thank you for attending. The first item on the agenda are apologies for non-attendance.
Chair, I have apologies from Councillors DL, Shacklock, Jelly, McEwen and Watts, and I have Councillor Colquhoun and Councillor Addison substituting.
Thank you. Members will have been sent the minutes, and there is a gender supplement pack which has been issued, and they show the minutes of the meeting, or the draft minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of October and the 4th of December. If we take those separately, do I have a proposer and a seconder, and are members happy with the accuracy of the minutes of the 30th of October? So we have a proposer and a seconder. All those in favour, can you put with your cards? Thank you. And again, for the 4th of December, are any comments on the accuracy? Is everyone happy? In that case, can we have a proposer and a seconder, please? Thank you. Are you proposing? Councillor Carter is proposing and Councillor Marks was seconding again. All those in favour? Thank you. That takes us on to agenda item 2, members' declarations of interest. Can members confirm that they are coming to the meeting with an open mind and have not predetermined any of the applications? Do members have any declarations to make that aren't already registered? No. So, agenda item 3, planning applications for planning permission, listed building consent and appeal information from the planning manager. We have so 3.1, we just have one application for this evening, NK/2021/0292 Hanwood Park, and that's a Section 106 update of outline application with all matters reserved for the erection of up to 3,383 dwellings, included associated schools, district and local centres, hotel, healthcare, leisure employment, formal and informal open space, including play facilities, associated infrastructure and roads, Hanwood Park, Cranford Road, Kettering. And Louise and Reddy, I believe you're taking this.
Thank you. There is an update for this committee item, which I'll briefly run through. The first part of the update relates to the new National Planning Policy Framework, which was published on Thursday, the 12th of December. This has been reviewed and considered by officers, together with the PPG and the written ministerial statement. The changes in the NPPF do not alter the assessment planning balance or the recommendation for this planning application. We've also received some additional comments since the publication of the agenda. I'll summarise them, but full copies are available on our website. We've had an additional response from the NHS Integrated Care Board and NHS Property Services, a combined response. The NHS support in principle the offer outlined in the report, and that the funding for health will be prioritised as part of tranche 1 of the Section 106 for this development. The NHS highlight that the fallback position is only acceptable where this is back-to-back to the 10-year period and not a side-by-side option. The officer's response is that comments are noted, and that is addressed in section 7.3 of the report, and the comments reflect the current position and offer in terms of health for the 106. We've also received an additional response from Weekly Parish Council. They have concerns around the increased traffic through Weekly as a result of the removal of the Weekly Walton Avenue and the downgrading of the access road from the Grange estate to a footpath. The most recent reply from Highways recommends not approving the application until further investigation on traffic volumes have been completed. Junction 10A is essential, and without a firm commitment to build, this potential impact on Weekly is significant. In terms of the officer's response, section 3, in terms of consultation of the committee report, sets out the most recent comments of National Highways. Section 7.6 of the report, together with the original which is appended, address these comments. The recommendation at section 1.1, which I will come back to as part of the presentation, is subject to the imposition of conditions and or obligations as required by National Highways. The final comment that we've received is from a landowner, and their comment states that they consider they should be a signatory to the 106. This will be considered by the council's lawyers when we move to formal drafting of the agreement. An additional condition is also recommended to those listed in the committee report, and that relates to noise impact assessments, and to require that each reserve matter, so every detailed planning application that comes forward for parcels of development, must be accompanied by their individual noise impact assessments. I won't read the full wording, but that is available in the update. So I'll move on to present the item. I will start with a bit of background to the item, and then my colleague Reddy will run through some slides and take you through in a little bit more detail the planning obligations which are set out at section 7 of the report. So this item before you tonight is an update on the section 106 for Hanwood Park, and that's further to the resolution to approve from committee in May of this year. Overall, officers are satisfied that the obligations set out in the report will ensure that a sustainable development is delivered. The first thing I'd like to just highlight in the report is section 1.1, which is the recommendation, and that's on page 6 of the agenda. And I just want to particularly note recommendation 1A and D. and how it relates to national highways. So in terms of the current response from National Highways, they have a holding recommendation in place, not an objection. They support the principle of development, but there is continued work ongoing with the developers consultants and National Highways to confirm the exact mitigation and the trigger points for that mitigation. And that will form either conditions or planning obligations, and that forms that recommendation 1D. At the end of recommendation 1A, you'll note that the recommendation to approve is subject to the 106 planning conditions, but also, importantly, removal of that holding recommendation. If members endorse the recommendation this evening and the approach that we have set out to planning obligations at section 7, we will then proceed to formal drafting of the agreement. So just to provide a quick bit of background to Hanwell Park, it's an allocated strategic site in our joint core strategy, and it's a key part of our delivery on our current strategy for housing supply across North Northants. It's set to the east of Kettering and Barton Seagrave, and it has a long history. It had original outline consent back in April 2010, and it has a number of detailed permissions in place. And currently there is detailed permission for 2,117 dwellings. And you'll note in the report and the original report that that's referred to as the consented development. And that's important because I'll come back to that in a moment. So due to the timeframes for submission for reserved matters, the detailed planning applications, and that time has now passed, a new outline and 106 is required for the remainder of the development. The new outline is critical to enable not only further applications to come forward, but to ensure that the delivery of key community and social infrastructure, for example, the secondary school, community facilities, health building, and so on. In terms of the consented development and the existing 106 agreement and the new agreement, the report sets out in section 5 some detail on this. Now, the existing 106 agreement is based on a roof charge approach where an amount per market dwelling is collected from the development, and then those monies are pooled together for delivery of infrastructure. Now, as detailed in the report, there are pros and cons to that particular approach. And in parallel to the formal drafting of the agreement, we will be reviewing the roof charge approach and the overall structure to the new agreement. But it's important to note that whatever form this agreement takes, the obligation set out section 7 will be secured and delivered, whatever form the actual agreement takes itself. Section 5.4 of the report, there's a summary regarding the current position of the 106 and the monies that have been collected to date and the monies that are forecast to be collected. Allocations of funds do have to go through a formal process, particularly the internal process of the council. But the report does set out where funds are likely to be allocated. So a priority for the next sort of tranche of money is the secondary school, some traffic calming works on Walton Lane, and also the next primary school that's to be delivered. So there's some information there about how the council does wish to potentially allocate those funds. In terms of the new agreement, there will be two parts to the legal agreement. Part A to the agreement will cover any variations needed to the existing, and that's really to make sure that the existing and the new agreements tie together and secure everything that we need it to. And then Part B will be the new obligations. So there is quite a bit of work to do in terms of formal drafting to make sure those two link up effectively. The last thing I just want to mention before we move on is around viability. So the agenda papers set out the current position on viability. It's important to note that the PPG, the Planning Practice Guidance, sets out that a reasonable return to a developer is between 15 and 20%. In this particular case, the developers targeted a lower profit threshold of 10%. And the purpose of that is to maximise the amount of affordable housing that we can obtain from the scheme, and also to maximise the contributions that we can obviously generate for key infrastructure. The scheme is currently showing a return of 7.95%, which is obviously below the 10% target. And that's with approximately £42.6 million available for Section 106 currently. The developer has agreed in principle to a review mechanism and also a profit share agreement within the 106. The detail of that will be negotiated through the formal drafting process. Viability reviews will need to take place at agreed points, and that will be an obligation set out clearly in the agreement. Those points do need to be agreed. The principles of profit share has also been agreed, whereby the council and the developer will share a proportion of any uplift in profit over 10%. Linked into that, the report in section 7 at the end of that particular section sets out that there are 2 tranches of planning obligations. The first that will be delivered using the currently available funds, the £42.6 million, and then the second, which will be reviewed as part of the viability review mechanism. So the first tranche includes key on-site infrastructure, including health building, education facilities, affordable housing, community facilities, public transport strategy, and also the monitor and manage approach to highways. The second tranche is related to other obligations, the majority of which are off-site. The agreement will need to set out the total 106 liability for the development, which is effectively tranche 1 and tranche 2 obligations totaled up. And that's so that we can make sure that any profit share relates to the shortfall in Section 106 monies. So I will leave it there and I'll hand over to my colleague who will say a little bit more about some of the individual planning obligations. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. If I can just explain the zoning plan slide behind me, so you can just follow my presentation. Just to make it clear, Zone A is the consented development. That's already being built out at the moment. Sorry, apologise. Zone A is the consented scheme already being built out at the moment. Then the developers, as part of this development, it's the red and blue areas. Zone B is the area around the central retail component and open space component, which they want to build out as part of their first phase. And then the red areas is the Zone C, and that's part of the phase 2. So just to make it clear, that's the intention, that they'll build out the more of the central core next when they secure, if there was secure planning permission, then build outwards. But of course, there might be areas where they build areas in Zone B first, and as part of the phase 1 works, they might go to Zone C, depending how the marketing goes and what interest is shown as well. I'm just going to refer to a map that was shown to you before. This is a map of the Strategic Master Plan, and one of the series of documents that the developers provided for the council, to the council for consideration. And I'm going to quickly just run through the land uses with you. They're all in different codes, but as the planning manager has explained, this application is about 3,383 new homes, a mix of housing types and tenures, and a significant amount of affordable housing. There's also a district centre with shops and a network of other services involved in that as well. There's leisure and recreational facilities. There's a health facility. There's primary and secondary education facilities with nursery, employment uses, quality open space involving both informal and natural and formal green spaces. Then there's also, importantly, an internal network of dedicated pedestrian and cycle links as well, and biodiversity enhancements. Okay. What I'd like to do now is to turn to page 28 of the report and talk very, very quickly about viability. Pages 28 to 31 are basically explaining to committee members just a little bit about the background about viability, so you understand sort of key concepts, the history to it, and sets out sort of key matters that it's important to have an understanding of to be able to consider some of the other key proposals when you're assessing viability assessments. So, turning to page 32, where it says the assessment relating to the financial viability statement. As the planning manager explained, a financial viability statement was submitted back in November 2023, and then following the May 24 planning committee meeting, there have been ongoing discussions between all the parties involved, and a financial viability assessment has been subject to a review, which has subsequently led to an agreed viability model. So, as a result of that viability assessment, financial contributions and issues related to planning obligations were discussed, and further discussions took place. I'm now going to move on just to quickly speak about planning obligations. A few things I need to highlight to members is that, firstly, planning obligations assist in mitigating the impact of unacceptable development to make it acceptable in planning terms. Planning obligations may constitute a reason for granting planning permission if they meet the statutory tests, and the tests that are laid out are A, necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms, secondly, directly related to the development, and finally, fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind to the development proposed. So, bearing those rules and also the outcome and discussions of the viability appraisal, we're recommending that the contributions be divided into two specific groups or two tranches, as in the report. So to make it very clear, in the first tranche, we've got affordable housing, and that is a 20% on-site provision of affordable housing, which is a good percentage to have. And then I'm going to turn briefly next to the health facility. That's also been agreed in principle. We've had lots of discussions with the Health Authority, the ICB, and we've come to a reasonable sort of compromise between all the parties involved. So the recommendation itself is that there's an option where the Health Authority will commission and build it themselves. They're given a time period to build that, and if they don't, the developer is likely to build it and put in an NHS provider. It might be a multi-use building or things like that. On the education side, a site is being given by the developers to put in a secondary school. That's up to about 10 acres. And there's a financial contribution as well, which is highlighted in the report. With regards to primary schools, land is also being allocated for primary school provision. The site itself will accommodate a total of 4 primary schools. 1 primary school has already been delivered on site. 2 of the school sites are within the developer's control, and a 3rd site, which might be the 2nd primary school to be developed, is within a different developer's control. But again, that will be under the remit of the original 106 to make sure that takes place. With regards to day nursery provision, the applicants are proposing a day nursery within the district centre with a floor space of 500 square metres. If the provision proposed by the developer is insufficient to meet that need, then there may be a financial contribution which will need to be submitted, and then again that will be part of any viability review as well. There is also being a provision made for SEND provision as well. The other important thing in the first tranche is sort of biodiversity measures to cater for wintering birds, and also to make sure that certain sites of special scientific interest and nature reserves are monitored and managed correctly. In the second tranche, we've I'll run through a few examples of what we've got under there. This is subject to the financial viability appraisal when it's been recessed, and the model that we've used in terms of profitability turns to a certain percentage. Then that extra money will be provided to the council, and these are the uses that I'm talking about here in terms of a contribution to the learning pool facility, a contribution to the community building. The community building is actually going to be provided by the developer. We also got the IC Valley Greenway, where there's sort of important sort of footpaths and cycle paths. So there's also discussions taking place on that. And the summary is that, subject to the list of Section 106 that we've identified in the report, the recommendations that the planning manager has spoken about, we're recommending that those recommendations be supported. Thank you, Chair, that's all.
Thank you. We have 2 registered speakers for the application before committee this evening, and each speaker will have 3 minutes. Can I ask Councillor Jenny Davies, the Town Councillor for Burton Latimer, to come forward? Thank you. When you're ready, you have 3 minutes, but take your time and when you're ready. Just press the, yes, you've got it, yes. So when you're ready, we'll start timing.
Wonderful, thank you. Am I ready to go, yes? Yeah, thank you very much. From a point of view of Burton Latimer, there's 3 items of concern that I mainly wish to speak on. Roads and traffic, secondary education, and the lack of reference to other developments. The concerns about roads and traffic felt by Burton Latimer Town Council seem to be supported by various views of national highways throughout the planning process, in that they're saying that planning permission not be granted. It is recommended the application should not be approved for a further period of 3 months, etc. That they are still not happy with the proposals relating to transport and traffic. And given the problems that could arise from this, I think that should be supported. And with the recent developments around the proposed Junction 10A, National Highways are saying the delivery of the proposed A14 junction is a prerequisite to allow more than 3,500 dwelling units to be occupied. The report also identifies 37 junctions requiring consideration and assessment, with the majority requiring intervention of some kind. So I think it's of huge importance, I think, to whole areas, but certainly as far as Burton Latimer is concerned, that the whole issue of roads and transport must be dealt with appropriate importance. We're particularly concerned about secondary school provision, which is needed, and the proposal states that the new Section 106 agreement will be required in order to secure the necessary infrastructure needed. Now, I can't say too much, but there's a huge amount in the report, which is very interesting, about the whole issue of education, and I'm assuming that committee members have already given this their proper attention, and that they will not let this whole issue of secondary education fall, because it would cause great problems for people in Burton Latimer. There's also, in particular, I think the Section 106 provision should be protected, because we should ensure that no Section 106 money, which is intended to provide the secondary school, should be transferred from education to any other heading, including roads. The roads have to be dealt with, and they should not be able to take money from any part of S106 that is aimed at education. The other point I wish to make there is a lack of reference to the proposed so-called Kettering Energy
Can
Park.
you come
and-
to finish your
Sorry?
speak? Can you finish your speech? Sort of wrap up. Just come to a conclusion. Thank you.
Just to say that I think that we should take account of all of these matters together, because if we just make decisions on one part of it like this and ignore the KEP and the Hallam Land proposal, it's a recipe for disaster and
Thank
for
you.
misery for
Thank you.
residents.
We
Thank
need
you.
to look at the application in front of us that we have in
Thank you.
front of us. Thank you. So can I just check whether members have any questions of clarification from the speaker? No? No, thank you. The next speaker is Donna Stock, agent for the applicant. And again, when you're ready, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening. As has been discussed by officers, Hanwell Park has been a committed development since 2010 and now is home to some 3,000 residents. Implemented are some 1,400 properties with 24% affordable housing, along with supported road and drainage infrastructure and Hayfield Cross Primary School. Once completed, there'll be a further 3,400 homes towards the council's housing supply, employment space with some 3,600 direct jobs, along with schools, open space, health services and other essential infrastructure to make it a truly sustainable development. In May of this year, we received your unanimous support to approve our proposals, subject to us reverting to you later this year to update you on key matters. As the officers have advised, we've been working hard on those matters with key stakeholders and partners on the ground. These matters include the removal of the NHS's concerns over our proposed mitigation pack in relation to health provision, an agreed set of heads of terms to inform the Section 106 drafting, and significant and positive progress with the strategic and local highway teams to verify proposed off-site transport mitigation and method of control through condition and Section 106. You'll remember that our previous offer of health mitigation for our scheme was space for a surgery within a multifunctional health hub with a period of rent-free. This was not considered to be an acceptable approach to the NHS, and as such, since the last committee, the parties have agreed to service land with a financial contribution to delivery of a health facility. As such, this matter is considered to be resolved in an acceptable way by the Council's planning team, and the NHS objection has been lifted, as detailed in your late sheet. In regard to other heads of terms, we've agreed with the Council's officer and their viability consultants a financial package which maintains the scheme's viability and provides suitable mitigation for education, leisure, health, biodiversity and highways matters. A viability review mechanism will be included in the Section 106 to allow for the sharing of additional profits towards other mitigation for the development that are less critical but still valuable. The summary of those heads of terms are included in the officer's report, and further detail will be the matters for that Section 106 drafting in due course. The Council, however, has been satisfied the proposals still constitute a truly sustainable and appropriately mitigated development. Lastly, in respect of highway matters, at both the local and strategic level, significant progress has been made in traffic modelling and the verification of off-site mitigation proposals at the local level. Further design and evaluation of those local road schemes continue to be developed, and matters of detail will be controlled via condition and through Section 106 obligations. This is in line with the monitor and manage approach endorsed at the last committee. On strategic highway matters, the revised Grampian
come to a
condition...
conclusion, please? Thank
Absolutely.
you. Finish it. Thank you.
On strategic highway matters, the revised Grampian for Junction 10 and A6 Link Road will suitably accounted for via condition or Section 106. We're grateful for the regular support and positive contributions with our ongoing teams at National Highways and North Highways Authority.
Thank you. I'm going to have to stop you there, but
That's
thank you very much. Do you mind just waiting to see if members have any questions of clarification? No, thank you very much. Can I thank both speakers? Thank you. For the purposes of debate in accordance with the Council's Constitution Rules 19.2 and 19.21, I will move the recommendation stated on page 6 and 47 your agenda papers. NK/2021/0292. It is recommended that A. Outline planning permission, all matters reserved, be granted subject to safeguarding planning conditions listed at the end of the report and subject to the completion of a satisfactory Section 106 legal agreement which secures appropriate planning obligations and subject to the withdrawal of the holding recommendation by National Highways. B. Should a satisfactory Section 106 legal agreement which secures appropriate planning obligations not be completed on or before 30th of April 2025, or any extension of time agreed in writing between the applicant and the local planning authority, that it be delegated to the Executive Director of Place and Economy to refuse planning permission. C. Authority be delegated to the Executive Director of Place and Economy in consultation with the Chair of the Planning Committee to impose planning conditions and or secure planning obligations as appropriate in relation to the local highway mitigation schemes. D. Authority be delegated to the Executive Director of Place and Economy in consultation with the Chair of the Planning Committee to impose planning conditions and or planning obligations to secure appropriate mitigation on the strategic road network in order to facilitate the removal of the current holding recommendation from National Highways. And E. Authority be delegated to the Executive Director of Place and Economy in consultation with the Chair of the Planning Committee to make any minor alterations or substitutions to the planning conditions or accompanying approved plans that relate to factual updates or typographical errors for the purposes of ensuring that planning conditions are precise and enforceable. And members will also note the condition on the update sheet. So I'll now open that up for debate. I think, so sorry, and I need a seconder first. Councillor Prentice, thank you. Sorry, and now I'll open it up for debate. Councillor Marks.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I mean, as we all know, this goes back to the development agenda many years ago, so to some extent, our hands are tied, but only to some extent. I'm glad there's been movement on the health provision. I had serious concerns about that, and I'm glad there's been movement. I'm disappointed that the secondary school isn't clearer in when we're getting it. Late 2020. We already have a terrible shortage of school places right now. People are being bussed as far as Rothwell and Desborough. So that's bad. The road situation is also very bad. We desperately need the Junction 10A. So I'm gratified that the actual recommendations say that if this isn't basically sorted out by the end of April, we'll refuse it. So that gives us a fairly narrow time period to really tie this down on 106. So the health hurdle more or less crossed. Education not dealt with. Roads not yet dealt with. It's dealt with in principle, but it's not dealt with in the sense of being nailed down, and it desperately needs to be. But so I'm boring people now.
No, I didn't think so. It's important that we address those matters, and I am pleased that the recommendations do safeguard if we give planning permission. It's certainly if we go along with the recommendations that they do safeguard. Are there any other members want to make comment on this? No?
Chair, is it possible I could just
Of course, please
address a couple
do,
of comments? Is that okay? So I just wanted to pick up in terms of the secondary school. So We have requested £15 million index linked from the development, and the first half of that will come from the existing 106 that we've already collected from the consented development. And that's a priority for the council, and that's being worked on through the developer contributions board within the council, because that follows a slightly separate process. So the developer has agreed to everything we've asked for in terms of secondary school contributions. The Department for Education is currently delivering the secondary school. Currently, they've said they wish to open in 2027, which I would say is an ambitious target. But I think if everyone collaborates and gets on with it, basically, then I think, we could achieve that. But it does require all parties, including the DFE, to come to the table to do that. But what I would say is obviously the developer has agreed to all the contributions and obviously the land and everything that we've asked of them in terms of that, but the delivery will not be within their control. It will be the DFE to do that. And then in terms of National Highways, obviously they have the holding recommendation in place currently. They have previously talked about a trigger point of 3,500 for Junction 10A. But I get the sense they just want to make sure that that is correct. All the modelling is tied up, and obviously that is taking much longer than we had anticipated and hoped. But we spoke to them last week, and they're working on that as fast as they can in terms of obviously making sure that what they require, whether that be conditions or obligations, pins down and secures exactly what is needed. And I would say it's not just, obviously Junction 10A is vitally important for Kettering, but they will look at the whole of the strategic network, so there may be some improvements needed at Junction 10, for example, or other junctions. So that also needs to come back in terms of, are we asking for particular things at particular points in time? So that all needs to be tied up, as well as Junction 10A, which I accept is the most important thing, but there are other elements that need to be bottomed out. But the recommendation is clear that we cannot approve until that recommendation is lifted and that we have those conditions and obligations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marks.
Yes, through the chairman. It's the timings. I mean, we're already desperately short of school places, and the roads are already dreadfully congested, and it really is awful already. It's the timings and the delivery that worry me, and I profoundly hope I'm just being paranoid, but I am very, very worried.
Thank you. Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, same again what Paul's just said. I'm a little bit concerned about the traffic going through Wharton and going through Wheatley. I feel that's going to increase quite by a lot. So really, highways really do need to look at that. That's mine.
Thank you. And I understand the concerns, but the recommendations do address those, and I ask a safeguard if agreement is not reached. Are there any other comments from members? Councillor Sims.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say that the 106 agreement we see in front of us, and obviously it's been independently assessed and for viability. We are where we are. Is a lot of history to this site over many, many years, has already been indicated. And I think personally, I understand the concerns of highway and education, and which is very important factors. We need to have the services provided and out for the community, not just the community going there, but the communities across the whole of the area. But I think that goes back to other developments as well, not just this one. So we have to deal with what we're dealing with tonight. And that, I think we have no alternative but to support this. I think it's right. It's index linked, as is already mentioned, which I'm glad to see. I know it's different from other agreements that we have in developments like Section 38, where we have bond money, and that, or supposed to in most cases. So that's protected if a company goes into administration. And at the 106 agreements, what sort of protection do we have there on this agreement if the company was to fold and that with only 3/4 of the obligations being completed. Now, you could sell it on, or the administrators could sell it on to another interested party, but the profit line would be lower because there's less of it to build. So what sort of protection do the public have? Could you explain that to the committee, please?
I'll just briefly, and there might be some others that wish to obviously comment as well on the matter. What I would say is planning obligations run with the land. So if obviously the company or the developer wishes to move on and it goes to another house builder, developer, promoter, then all those obligations are still in place and they still have to be met. Obviously, if someone else were to develop the site, you're right, they could potentially come back in at a point in time to review the viability of the scheme. Obviously, in this case, the developer is taking a lower profit target of 10%, whereas a developer could come in and say legitimately that actually 15% is accepted. So, you know, we can't control that element of the future, I suppose, is what I'm saying. We can obviously make sure that the obligations are tied to the land, and we can work within the parameters of the law, but we can't really look beyond that in terms of what might happen in terms of an actual company folding itself. Obviously, in terms of specifics, so if I take open space as an example, if there's a management company on an open space and that folds, then there are provisions in terms of the council potentially taking land on. But that's just one specific example.
Yeah, I think Jasper wanted to come in as well, quickly as well. Yeah, would you like to? Oh, sorry. Oh, right.
I think Louise actually has explained it really well. I think ultimately, if a new landowner comes in or if a new party comes in, the land is bound and they're obliged to comply with existing 106. It's about probably just ensuring there's a series of restrictions on development to make sure things are delivered, but ultimately you can't force, if the developer folds, you can't force the development to be built out. So it would be up for renegotiation if someone came in, and it would be subject again to, as Louise says, a reassessment and a redetermination at that point.
Thank you. Councillor Sims, you want to come back?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the explanation from both of you. But actually, I am obviously well aware that the legal agreement goes with the land, and and if a developer was to fold, what I would suggest, it does say in here you'll be continually monitoring the 106 agreement is been adhered to by the agreement signed by all parties concerned. However, I would suggest, and I'd like to make sure, the agreement's only as good as it's addressed, as long as it's enforced. And that monitoring needs to be really, really tight. And that regular, and I think members should be kept informed of all developments of this sort of structure, this sort of size, that these 106 are safe, because we have had, positions in the past, examples of where, not just in this area, but in other areas where companies have folded, because it is difficult times. And I would also suggest that you don't just check on the 106 that's been adhered to, but also the performance of the company as a whole, and that, which is actually readily available on Companies House. And you can see the financial status of each company. So there, the alarm bells can be rang if you think there's issues concerned with the viability of the companies. And that's completely within your legal rights to do that.
Thank you. Do officers want to make any comment, further
I'm just going to
comment?
say thank you for the last comment, but also to say you're completely right in terms of what you say about monitoring, and also there's no point monitoring if you're not going to then enforce something. So there's obviously provisions in the agreement for not only the viability reviews, but monitoring by our internal Section 106 team. Now, obviously, we've got the Developer Contributions Board, and slightly going off the plan application, but we've got that board in place within the council. So it may be that through that, there could be updates taken on the major schemes to keep members updated, but that would be something for members to ask that particular team. I can't commit on their behalf, but that's something I'd suggest that might be useful, both for officers and members.
Thank you. Are there any further comments from anyone? No, thank you. So therefore, we have a proposer and seconder to approve the officer recommendations on page 6 and 47. Recommended that from A to E, which I read out earlier, and with addition of condition shown on the update sheet. Can I see all those 4, please? And that's unanimous.
That's unanimous.
Thank you. We have no urgent items of business to address. Therefore, can I wish everyone a happy Christmas? Thank you for attending this evening, everyone. And I'll close the meeting. Thank you.